it's time for us to do another comparison video here on the channel. You've already seen the thumbnail, you've already seen the title by this point. We're comparing Skullwinder to Eternal Witness. But just before we get into the video for today, if you are enjoying the content that I'm putting out there, please do consider subscribing, turning on that notifications. It really helps us out. But with that being said, let's get right on into the video for today. Righty, so as I said, we're discussing whether Skullwinder is better than Eternal Witness. So, I think a lot of YouTubers have actually kind of come out and said similar-ish things. I just think, I've played a lot more Magic now in my life, and I never really thought too much about Skullwinder. I knew it existed, but I never really thought about this. And I think I've seen some videos out there online and whatnot, but again, it's just like one of those things I think you start realizing when you've played so many games and you've played so much, and especially more recent games that I've been playing, sort of thing, is that I feel just, like a lot of little things really add up in Skullwinder's favor. Now, not to say that Eternal Witness, you should never play it, maybe you should play both, but I just think that there's a lot of upsides to Skullwinder, and maybe it should see more play, because I think it's a little underplayed maybe in comparison. For comparison's sake, Eternal Witness is in 162,000 decks, which is 27% of the decks that it could go in, which is 603,000. So that's a lot of decks that Eternal Witness can go in, and it's only in about, a third of the decks that it could go in. Now, that could be, in theoretical, higher as well, but hey, there you go. It is still a very heavily played card. 27 or 30% basically is quite high. So for comparison, Skullwinder is in only about 9,000 decks, which is 2% of about the same number of decks, 6,000 or 600,000 or so decks that it could go in. Now, Skullwinder is a 50-cent, well, basically 25-cent card now, and Eternal Witness is a $4 card. So, and maybe that price will change over time if more people start getting into this idea that Skullwinder is a bit better. And I'm going to make a few points here just quickly to, say why I've kind of come around to this, epiphany. I don't know, I guess it's just one of those things that I've kind of started going, you know what, maybe this card is a lot better than what I thought it was. And, it does give away that value to an opponent where the opponent gets a card back. But, I think there's so much political value in that. And especially when sometimes you don't have the answer for something that somebody else is doing. You might be like, hey, Greg, I saw that you use Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile or whatever it was, earlier in the game or whatever it was. Or you used a braid or whatever it was earlier in the game. Some removal spell earlier in the game. So we need to deal with this thing that, Alex over here has. If I let you get that card back, can you get rid of it? And, we'll be buddies for a little while or whatever. It's not that. And it's one of those things. Yes, this is not one of those things. Again, I'm never going to be talking about CDH. But, except for to say, I'm not talking about CDH or whatever, things like that. But, again, it's not a CDH kind of card, definitely not. But again, in the meta game that I'm playing in, and certainly in the more casual meta game, it's still probably worth it. You can get that political value to a degree, or at least a little bit of hey, if I help you to get that card back, can you kill this thing that's causing both of us a problem, or at least slow this other person down that's really getting far ahead and we really need to do something about them. And hey, oh look, I get a card back as well. Oh, look, that's really cool because, hey, I've, made a deal-ish with somebody and, I've gotten that little bit of value out of that. And, hey, look, I've got this 1/3 Death Toucher. Now, like, Eternal Witness is nice, but as soon as it's on the battlefield, it's done. It doesn't have any relatively, like, anything on the battlefield at all. It has zero relativity. So it's, just get back a card from your graveyard. And that's nice. And again, it's one of those things. If an opponent's going to get more value out of it or whatever, then it's one of those things that it's a little bit worse in a sense that you have to kind of give that away to be like, oh, okay, I have to give that, opponent a card. But what if an opponent has no cards in their graveyard? You could just be like, hey, opponent, you can get a card back. Oh, what's that? You haven't got a graveyard? Oh, too bad. Like type thing. You can do that as well because sometimes that happens even when it's sort of fairly mid to late game. Or if they, whatever, even if they're, got something in their graveyard, maybe it's pretty minor for the most part, and even if it is more medium-ish, or even more goodish or better than what you would want them to get, maybe it's way better than having to deal with another opponent that's just absolutely going ham on you. And at least somebody else can, be, again, getting that political value, getting that, friendship going for a little while in the game might just be just enough to help you out. Or, again, getting that extra card back from your graveyard, could be really helpful as well, or whatnot. Or, again, you might be like, hey, this person has two things that we really need to get rid of. I'll get back, if I help you to get back one of your kill spells or one of your cards from your graveyard, will you get this kill spell so you can kill that, and I'll get this other thing from my graveyard at the same time, and I'll kill this other thing. Again, working together, political value, all of that stuff. And then when it's on the battlefield, it's a 1/3 death touch. So anything that attacks into it is probably going to die. And if anything has trample, it's absorbing more of that damage than what Eternal Witness will do. So a lot of those little things where it's got more toughness, so it absorbs more damage from trample or whatnot. Again, that's really useful. Like Death Touch, really useful. Kills anything that attacks into it. Offensively, can be used. Like, again, 1 damage isn't a lot, but, most people are going to be like, oh, it has Death Touch, so I might as well just not block because, well, it's only 1 damage. And, hey, again, you could be having that for political value. You say, hey, I've got Toski on the battlefield. All I want to do is, or the Monarch's in play or whatever. All I want to do is hit you for Monarch. I'm just going to attack you with this 1/3 Death Touch thing. So just don't block it. Okay, cool. I'm not really doing any damage to you. I'm just, taking the Monarch so that I can get the Monarch for card draw or whatever. And things like that. Or I'm just attacking you to get card draw off my Toski or for whatever. I'm not really trying to kill you. I'm just trying to... Or I'm just attacking your Planeswalker for 1 just to keep it from ulting, too quickly or whatever. Things like that. Oh, I'm just attacking it for 1, okay? I'm not trying to kill it. I'm just, keeping it in check and things like that. Again, it's one of those things. It can be very useful because, again, people will be like, oh, well, all right, I'll let the 1 through or whatever. That's fine. Okay. Again, you could have tricks again, if you're one of those people to be like, what, giant growth it or whatever, or, things like that or whatever. I know that some people gently do that or, suddenly give it infect and somehow give it, plus up to 10 or whatever it is, and then it's like, the game's over or I killed you because you died because of infect. Haha, you have fallen for my trap, Yugi. Like that whole thing. Like, again, it's one of those things. Like, you could do those funny meme things with it. I know that in a certain deck, the Finn the Fanbearer would be really good as well. So certain decks would take more advantage of it in their deck as well than what you would take advantage of Eternal Witness because, hey, Muldrotha, you know what? I'll just get it back as well. Plus, I've already killed their thing or whatever, or they've had to use their removal on it, and unless it gets exiled. But then again, hey, look, I'll sacrifice it to this other thing or whatever. And then, hey, look, I'll get something else back from my graveyard or whatever. Or Marin, things like that. Like, again, um, there's lots of decks that are very recursive decks, and in those decks where you can keep recurring it and keep recurring it, you can keep that relationship going with one person, or start going, okay, this relationship's starting to sour, or this relationship isn't beneficial to me, or that person's about to win, so I don't know whether I really want to be best friends with them, or I want to try to take them down or whatnot. And sometimes, hey, you just start shooting for second place, but hey, like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, well, at this point, is it worth it? The game's been going for a couple of hours or whatever it is, like, yeah, at a certain point you start going, yeah, well, really, even if I help this other person, this game isn't wrapping up quickly, so, well, and maybe, even if it, like, is helping that other person, again, to that degree in those situations, it's like, well, is that actually going to have an appreciable difference on the outcome of the game? Like, if somebody's just going to, win or whatever. So you can always find those opportunities that I think it just has, a lot more potential in the game. Not to say that you can't play Eternal Witness, because Eternal Witness is really good as well, but I just think the usefulness, if you're coming down to, like, choosing, like, one card of the other, like, I've felt like I've changed my mind on this, like, I always thought that the political value wasn't a really big thing that much, but hey, you know what? It's there, and that's one of those things that, like, you always want to use any leverage that you can in the game. It's one of those things that you have to use every tool sometimes to, keep the game flowing and keep somebody from running away with the game. Or if you're the person that's running away with the game, you might be like, hey, Steve, like, don't blow up my stuff next turn and I'll let you get a card back from your graveyard or something, Again, even if you're ahead, you can still be using it and being like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to get a card back from my graveyard. That's at minimum what I want out of this card. Like, that's good enough. Like, then also I have this 1/3 Death Toucher, which is very relevant on the battlefield in comparison to Eternal Witness, which is just a 1/1 and really doesn't do anything. Yeah, maybe I can Skull Clamp it or something else or whatever. But again, just like, that isn't not relevant, but you have to be in the right sort of deck, I would say, to take advantage of things like that. Or whatnot. I don't really think you have to be in the right deck to take advantage of Skullwinder. I think any deck can more generically use Skullwinder over Eternal Witness. But that's just my opinion, as I've sort of come to this sort of conclusion as of somewhat recently, and I've started to decide to, you know what, I'm going to take out Eternal Witness in my decks because, hey, again, it's like a $4 or $5 card or whatever it is, and Skullwinder's like 50 cents. So I just think that the value in that is just also there, and saying, hey, you know what, I'm just going to sell this $4 card and get, a whole bunch of Skullwinders equal to that value. And hey, look, now I've kind of, gotten much more card for my buck. And that's one of those things that I think is one of those important things. How much card value are you actually getting for your buck? Yes, this $4 card, which is a staple, and it's a staple for a reason because it's really good. I agree, but I'm just saying, I think, for the most part, that this is actually a little bit better because, hey, look, there's so many more parts to it that actually really help me out. And yeah, sure, there's that small quote-unquote downside, but again, I can use that downside to my advantage if I play it right, and or even if I kind of play it wrong. It's like, well, at a certain point, well, all I care about is I got a card back and I have this 1/3 Death Touch. So those two things kind of, again, really put me in that better position for the most part with this card. It absorbs more damage. It will kill anything that, comes into it. So it's really relevant on the battlefield, whereas just Eternal Witness really isn't. So that is where I am at with that. And I know as I said, a few other people out there on YouTubes and in, in different places have come to this similar conclusion about this card. But I don't know whether every single one of you have. But you can tell me if you have or if you haven't, or what you think about this. Am I right? Am I wrong? That's just my opinion. I just think it's really, really useful because, hey, it has all of this upside that I would, now sort of be more looking for, because, again, you can't always solve every problem in the games. And, hey, having that other person that's also kind of either in second or third or fourth place or whatever, being your ally, or being able to be more closely be your ally, is like, oh, okay, well, we're friends for a little bit, like, hey, look, we're obviously friends for a little bit, and whatnot, so that, it makes it much more, like, we really are in this fight together type thing, So, but anyway, guys, as I say, you can let me know your thoughts down there in the comments below, whether you agree or disagree, and do be civil down there in those comments, because, again, YouTube will auto-delete certain comments and whatnot if you're being too spicy down there. But if I don't see you down there in those comments, I'll see you in the next one.